Are you ready?
Let's go.
Now circling in the neutral zone.
Here's the pitch on the way. 36 yards for the win.
This.
Here comes a big chance. The shot
is
this the dagger?
The neutral zone.
This is as good as it gets.
The Neutral Zone is brought to you by the Ontario Para Network. Follow them online at onpara.ca.
Now, here's your host, two-time Paralympian, Brock Richardson.
What's going on? It's time for another edition of The Neutral Zone. I am indeed your host, Brock Richardson. What's coming up on today's show, you ask? Well, let me tell you. We are going to be joined by Canadian blind hockey player Simone Richard, who's going to tell us about a recent 3-game series between Canada and the United States. He's also going to talk about parasports in general, which is always a good conversation to have. Plus, the NHL playoffs continue to roll on, and we're going to talk about it from a Canadian team perspective. And I'm going to tell you a bit later on in the program about a situation that happened with me this week. First time in my career this has happened. We're going to discuss it and get the panel's thoughts. I'm joined by Josh Watson and Cam Jenkins. Here come your headlines.
Neutral Zone headlines.
Have you ever dreamed of being courtside at a national championship? Now is your chance. The Ontario Para Network is looking for confident, game-loving volunteers to be table officials at the WBC National Championships at Durham College. The event takes place May 24th and 25th, and some of the things that you could be asked to do are run the shot clock, keep score at the score table, or run the game clock. If you're interested in being a volunteer, please email Tammy at onpara.ca.
The groups are locked in for the 2025 IWBF Men's Under-23 World Championships. Team Canada will battle it out in Group A, and the US will be a top Group B. The event will take place June 12th to the 20th. And we look forward to being able to talk about that once the event is done.
We congratulate Tiffany and Eileen, who have made it up the ranks. They will be coaching Team Canada this year with Bocce, so we congratulate both of them. And I can tell you, we're going to have Tiffany join us on the program in the coming weeks, so we look forward to that. Those are your headlines for this week. If you want to get a hold of us on social, here's how you can do that.
And welcome back to the Neutral Zone broadcast booth.
Play ball!
We're set to get this ball game underway. The first pitch is brought to you by Brock Richardson's X account at Neutral Zone BR.
Strike!
Pitch and a strike. Hey, gang, why not strike up a chat with Claire Buchanan from the Neutral Zone? Find her on X at Neutral Zone CB. There's a swing of the chopper out to second base, right at Claire as she picks up the ball, throws it over to the first base for a routine play.
Out!
And fans, there's nothing routine about connecting with Cam and Josh from the Neutral Zone at Neutral Zone Cam J and at J Watson 200. And the Neutral Zone is brought to you by the Ontario Para Network. Connect with them at OnPara Network. Follow them online at onpara.ca. Now that's a winning combination.
We are pleased to be joined by Canadian blind hockey player Simone Richard. He has played for Team Canada, and he recently came back from an event connected to the Diffie Sport Day, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Simone, welcome back to the program. Thanks so much for doing it.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's awesome to be here.
Simone, the Canadian Blind Hockey Tournament has been going for more than 10 years now. I'm curious, why is this event so important for the sport, both in Canada and...
Well, as you mentioned, it's been going on for more than 10 years now. It's been, I think it's the 12th or 13th year, but this year it was going on. So, and it's the biggest blind hockey event that there is in the world, really. Like this year there was 190 athletes, I believe it was, divided in 7 divisions, going from the children all the way to the high performance and the masters. Masters was a new division this year that was for athletes that were visually impaired, that were 40 age and over. So that was a great opportunity for them to go and compete. Just from the children and youth all the way to the high performance, it's the biggest stage that you want to be, right? And we have Canadians, we have Americans, we have people from Europe, from Finland, the UK that were there. So it's a big event for sure, and it's the biggest stage in blind hockey, as I mentioned. So why not be there, right? So it's a great event to be a part of.
Can you maybe speak to the growth of that event between its early beginnings up until present?
Sure. So the first Canadian Blind Hockey National Championship was in 2013 in Toronto, at the Manamy Center, where it is still hosted every year. The first year was, I believe we had about like 45 athletes that were there. I only started in 2016, but it was, it grew from 2013 all the way to 2025 here now, from about 45 athletes to now 190, right? Like we're way bigger than what we used to be. Back then in 2013 too, we were all Canadians. That was the only country that was playing blind hockey, really. A couple of years after that, the first American came, and then it started growing in the States. And then a few years after, then Nathan Tree from the UK and a few Finns came, and now it's starting to grow to Europe right now, right? So it's a big piece of the pie, if you want, to have Canadians there for sure. But the main goal is to grow the game elsewhere, and this tournament is a catalyst for that for sure, as being the best and biggest tournament out there. But the having the tournament like that and having the opportunity for other countries to come here in Canada and play, learn about blind hockey, go back to their country and grow the game there, that's what we want. It's eventually to get the sport to the next level, get it to hopefully down the road at the Paralympic Games and all that. So, that's kind of the vision, but that's where we're at. We're growing internationally, and that's what we want.
So now that we've heard a little bit about the growth of the game, I'm wondering, we've talked about the championship. How did your team do?
So on the Friday, we've won our first game. So I was playing in Select Division on Team Black. We won our first game on the Friday, and then we lost the 2 games on Saturday and Sunday, unfortunately. But for us, a big part of the weekend for all the athletes that were invited to play in the Select was also to get evaluated for the national team. So I was very honored to be selected for that team too. So I was very happy with my weekend personally. But unfortunately, we didn't get the job done as a team here, Team Black, that weekend. But it was a great weekend being with the boys again, and it's just always fun to be on the ice, competing against them and also playing alongside those guys. It's just a great way to play the sport that you love and be with guys that feel like family members to you, and just have fun on the ice. So great weekend overall.
Yeah, and as I understand, you recently got to represent Canada at another international series between Canada and the U.S. Can you tell us what it's like to put on that Canadian sweater?
It's always an honor. I've done it now in 2 sport with goalball before, and now in blind hockey. This was our 6th Canada-U.S. series for blind hockey that we've done just this past week in the Défi Sportif in Montreal. So it's always an honor. I've always wanted to play for Canada in hockey for sure when I was growing up, and I never thought it would even be possible now to be 7 years in to be selected for this team. It's quite special, to be honest, and it never grows old, really. It's always a nice feeling to be selected on that team, and then to go there and have a great weekend with the guys and great results out there that we want to keep going to. It's always something that you want to keep going for sure, but it never gets old for sure.
Now, Canada and the United States is always a rivalry, regardless of what sport we talk about. In this particular case, Canada has been victorious against the U.S. in all of the series. What leads to that amount of success?
Well, I think, a big piece of it is the growth of the game, obviously, in Canada was, sports started in Canada. We have quite a few really, really good players on our team. Not that the U.S. doesn't. Like, they have great players on their team, too, but they do need to find a few more, I think. I think our depth, which leads to this part, the depth of our team is, I think, a little more deeper than their team, and that makes a big difference at the end of a game for sure. When you have, the first, second, and third line going over the boards, shift after shift after shift. It gets kind of relentless on the other team, right? And I think that's a big part of our success. But we also want to acknowledge that the U.S. are making strides. They're having some really good players that are coming up the ranks here. Luke Miller's, Easton Alexander Kiddo, Dan Tram is a great player too. So they're coming up there, and we really hope to see the next step of the U.S. team, so we can have a little more rivalry on that side. But for Canadians here, we're happy with our results. We're happy with how we play, and we're going to keep growing on our side too. And hopefully we can keep growing the game out elsewhere on the world, so we can get the team to the Paralympic Games and see who wins at that top level at that time. Yeah.
And as I understand, you're currently working for Parasport New Brunswick. Is there anything that you can maybe tell us about that's going on with that organization?
We have lots going on. Parasport New Brunswick is the provincial sport organization for our four core sports is throwball, bocce, wheelchair basketball, and wheelchair rugby. So right now we're right in the mix of national championship season that we kind of call it. So all the national championships are happening for a lot of those sports. Go ball is happening in May. We have one junior athlete that's going to junior national. Wheelchair basketball, we had a couple championship with the Junior East and the CWBL championship that were in April here. And then we're gearing up for having a few athletes going to men's and women nationals possibly in May now. And then wheelchair rugby is at the end of May here, so it's for wheelchair rugby nationals. So it's a busy time of year for us for sure. We also had a couple athletes that are getting ready for Bocce Blast in June, and Teresa Mertlau, one of our athletes for Bocce too, just came back from Diffie as well for that. So no, it's a very busy time of year, but it's a fun time of year. Competition is always the best time of year, I find. So great things ahead.
When you think of your situation and what you have done, I mean, you played at all different levels. You played on national teams for Go Ball with now with blind hockey, but you're also working with a provincial sport organization. For you, when you see parasports at all levels, do you ever sit back and think that parasports is in a good place in general? Like, what's your overall feeling given that you get to put on so many different hats at different times in your life cycle?
I feel like, I feel like the parasport world is growing for sure. I've lived it since my first days when I came along with the national team, but it was back in 2012. We didn't really have much exposure in our sports, I find, in our sport of Go Ball. Even when I went to the Paralympic Games, we didn't have any streaming of any of our games. Now, you can catch any game on YouTube or anywhere that you want to catch it, really, right? So that's the main thing. It's awareness. That's the first step. So we've made a lot of progress on that side, I would say. Now it's figuring out from getting, more and more awareness or exposure, I guess, from that sense, and kind of translating it into participation at that point, finding athletes, making sure we can get everybody to actually be included in the sport and have the opportunities out there to make sure that everybody can play. And the inclusivity of the sport and all that, that's the main thing, right? So, at the end of the day, like, parasports is, whether you start at the grassroots or you end up being going into the pathway and going in the high performance pathway, let's say, you got to have opportunities for people to go and have fun and play, right? So that's the main thing I think we need to keep working on, is translating, I guess, that awareness piece that has already been kind of a foundation being placed, and now we got to keep moving into the participation phase of making sure that we can and grow that side of it. And I'm sure we're gonna, as a collective here in Canada and around the world, I'm sure we're up to the task. We're gonna keep pushing that as a community, I guess, and keep the movement going.
Yeah, one of the other things that sort of caught my attention from our interview, and I think it's something that you hear in different para sports, is that the select division was also used at the Canadian Championships as the selection piece for Team Canada. How much weight is an event like that when you think of you have 3 days to prove yourself and prove your worth of being on the national team for that year and for that time? How much pressure is then associated with, oh my goodness, if I don't do well, I could not represent my country?
Well, I mean, it's a lot of pressure for sure, especially for new athletes that are coming in, right? You might be in, it might be your first event, and then all of a sudden you're quote unquote scouted or kind of in the pool of possibly being selected, because there's the number of athletes is so low, I guess, maybe in your sport or in your category or classification or whatever it is, whichever sport it is that you're participating in, right, and competing in. So it really depends on the sport, depending on your classification, and what the standards and eligibility of that class would be, and where it can lead you, right? But for sure, it can be a lot for new athletes to come in and compete, right? And it's definitely something that I kind of feel like you kind of have to, kind of go through and on your own, I guess, right? And figure out what works, what doesn't in terms of preparation. And you will get the experience at the end of it, for sure. It does take a few cracks at it, a few events for sure, but it's definitely an adjustment. It's not the same as able-bodied sports, I guess, in that sense that, numbers are so low and you can kind of be projected really quickly in those sports, right? So it's kind of interesting. It's a different environment, but it leads to also a lot of great opportunities into, possibly going in and representing the country, which, maybe you never thought of doing, and now you have this huge opportunity because you have the talent to make it. You might be in a favorable, situation, favorable sport for you. And it might be a great opportunity for you to go out and travel and make new friends around the world and play a sport that you love, right? And that's what we all want is going out there and participating and playing a sport that we love at the best of our abilities, I feel like. So, at the end of the day, that's what matters.
Very cool. Simone, greatly appreciate you taking the time to do this interview. And again, congratulations on all the success with Team Canada, with parasports in general. You're doing all kinds of great things. So keep up the good work, and we appreciate your time today.
Thanks a lot, guys. Appreciate it.
That was Simone Richard, Team Canada athlete for the sport of blind hockey.
The Neutral Zone is sponsored by the Ontario Para Network. Their focus on the growth and development of wheelchair basketball, tennis, and rugby in Ontario.
So we just had our conversation with Simone Richard, which is always a pleasure. He's been on the program a few times. I just want to give both of your thoughts on the interview. Start with you, Cameron.
Yeah, he seems like a great guy. Has been doing it for, what did he say, since 2016, I believe. So he's been doing it for quite a while, and he's definitely dedicated, and that shows in some of the other events that he's taken place, being goalball. He was on the national team for that too. So, great interview. Looks like the Canadian blind hockey, it's growing. I remember, being there at the old Maple Leaf Gardens. I guess it's called the Mattamy Center now. Being able to be there to comment on the blind hockey games and just to see how it's grown over the years. It's fantastic to see, and that they have so many divisions now too. So it's growing, and that's a great thing.
Yeah, I always enjoy when we have Simon on the program. He's very well spoken. He knows his stuff, and we can talk to him about blind hockey or goalball or all things Parasport New Brunswick, which is always good to know what's happening with our friends out east. So it's a lot of fun when Simon comes on.
Yeah, I have had a pretty good relationship with Simone. He began working with Parasport New Brunswick a few years ago now, and the Canadian Paralympic Committee was so great in being able to give me a cheat sheet, I'm going to call it, and help me kind of connect with the national sport organizations, some of the provincial ones as well. And Simone happened to be on that list, and as soon as I saw the name, I immediately went back to the blind hockey days, and when we used to be with AMI, and how we'd go down there and would sit and watch some games for the weekend, and the Neutral Zone gang would have to put up with me, and vice versa with them for a weekend.
It was hard. Those days were hard.
I'm sure they were. Yeah, it was a good time, and I really enjoyed it, and I look back at that time fondly. Team Canada is obviously still atop the United States on skill level and just development. They beat the team United States very handily, double digits both games, which is cool. But it does take time for these programs to develop and become, and I'm sure that eventually the United States will build themselves where they need to be, and they're using it as a learning experience too, and seeing what they have to do to contend with our Canadian team, which is very, very skilled. And that's a testament, guys, to the fact that the Canadian championships are so competitive. Like, they are so competitive, and guys from all over the world come, and it's just so competitive from beginning to end, and I think that speaks to the depth of the program for Canada, and that's where we are here today with it. One of the things that I often makes me kind of raise an eyebrow, I guess, sometimes, is when you have conversations with para athletes who say, yeah, I was part of the select team at the Canadian Championships, which was also used as the selection for Team Canada. And it got me to think, geez, that's so much pressure on athletes and people to perform right at that moment. And I can understand the argument of we want people to peak at the time we want them to peak. But there just seems to be a little bit more availability to the mainstream sports athletes in selection, and more things than just one event are used, and it's over the course of the year. There are some national sports organizations that are going towards using the yearly statistics to pick their team, but there are still some, Josh, that look at this and say, nope, it's a one and done. So your thoughts on parasports organizations who do a one and done, and how do you feel about that?
Well, I don't really see a problem with it, to be honest, because with the size of the country, it's very hard to get everybody together, whether you're able-bodied or parasport focused. It's just a very large country. I do see the benefit of using perhaps provincial or regional competitions to maybe pare down the numbers, but overall, I'm quite okay with a national championship being used as a selection process, to be honest. I mean, the example I think of in the able-bodied world is the World Junior Hockey Championship. Those teams don't get together for more than one training camp, and we always seem to field a competitive team there. So I don't see a problem with it personally.
Yeah, I have a huge problem with it. I think if you're just for that one weekend or that one competition, that doesn't really show how you are as a player or being on a team. I think that it needs to be judged based on your year of playing hockey, if we're using that as the example. And you can find out from the club how many goals and assists you had if they track that, and they should be tracking that kind of information, because even at the World Juniors that Josh brought up, there's no way that they make a decision just based on that one training camp. They are looking at the other games throughout the season that they play in the OHL or WHL or the Q. And yeah, like they take a look at them at that training camp too, but I don't think that's the only thing that they base it on, because what happens if you get sick or you get the flu, but like you're a Connor McDavid type player, you telling me they're not going to pick him just because he played like crap during that one tournament? I don't think so. So I think it should be look over the course of the season to see how they're doing, and not just one weekend of a tournament.
Yeah. I mean, I think that for me, I look at it more on the disability angle. Funny, we're a parasports podcast looking at the disability angle of this. If you have a bad weekend, which is possible for the able-bodied world as well, but if you have a bad weekend in the disability community, it's tough. Like sometimes our body just doesn't do what we would normally do. I mean, I had a terrible selection camp in 2015 and didn't get to make Toronto 2015. Talked about it a lot on this program. Not bitter at all for not making it. Not
Not at all.
But it's tough. You have a one bad camp and it really can make the difference. And Josh, I see your point about like you want people to peak when they're supposed to, but my God, there's a lot of pressure on those athletes for one event and a 72-hour span in order to get it done.
Absolutely. And I'm not trying to diminish that in any way. I'm just saying that you, if you're going to represent your country, need to be able to perform when that pressure is there. And I understand that everyone has extenuating circumstances. Cam's absolutely right. Connor McDavid is going to make a Canadian team regardless of how he plays in a selection camp, because he's just the best player in the world. And I have no doubt that if a coaching staff had seen how you performed leading up to that camp, and if you were playing at your best, that they might throw out that camp and say, well, you just had a bad couple of days as CP acted up. I don't know the circumstances. We didn't have the same level of relationship back then that we do now, so I don't know what this situation was, but they made the decision they made. And unfortunately, I've been in situations where I've been, beaten by somebody who might otherwise not have beaten me, and it happened to be based on equipment, not on entirely skill. It was mostly skill, but there was a little bit of equipment issue involved. And it's frustrating, and you do feel defeated, and you do feel angry, and I understand that. But at the same time, you have to learn how to work through those things.
Yeah, it's we can talk about the circumstances offline as to what happened, because I'm not gonna delve into the details here. But I mean, I do understand to a point why the decision was made in the way that it was, but I'm also not a person that has the same resume as a Patrick Anderson, a Cindy Ouellette, Insight, Paralympic medalist here, wherever you want to. And I think that that's part of it. If you've earned that decision to be made, where you can look at a scenario and say, well, Patrick Anderson had a real crap training camp, but we know what his skill is. Yeah, he earns the right to do that. And I obviously didn't earn the right to get that was a bad camp. We're going to see past that. I think certain sports organizations are afraid to go out on a limb sometimes with athletes, because if you go out on a limb, then you run the risk of the other player who did better in result wise possibly getting upset, possibly putting the National Sports Organization at risk with protests. But again, you would say to yourself, well, this is why these things are in existence. And to me, in that instance, and certainly I'm saying this because it was me, I would have liked to have been in that situation where they went out on a limb and they said, no, we know that's what happened here. Let's let him be there. But again, it didn't happen that way. I just wish that certain sports organizations, Cameron, would take more of that going out on the limb as opposed to being afraid of what could happen.
Yeah. Like I said before, I think you should take that over the course of a season rather than one training camp that's a weekend. And yeah, taking things into consideration. Like at that point in time in 2015, had you already been to the Paralympics? Had you already won medals, Brock?
I had been to 2 Paralympics at that point. Did not win a medal at either of the Paralympic Games, but I had been to 2008 and 2012 by then. And I guess part of the challenge that existed with my scenario was I was pretty open with, I really wanted to be at this game, and I wanted these games, and I wanted to finish my career there. And I think that sort of had part of it was the fact that I was open to, hey, look, I'm finishing my career here, and that's what I wanted. And I think they sort of took that and said, instead of allowing me to finish my career on home soil, they said, let's move towards the future in that instance, Josh.
Yeah, and unfortunately that happens. I don't know if it was to do with focus. Again, we don't have to rehash all of this, but it's very tough designing a national team. There's always going to be people who are unfortunately let down, upset, angry. It's part of the deal. And I certainly can appreciate what you were hoping to do. And hindsight is always 2020. Perhaps you look back on it and say, well, I shouldn't have said what I said, but you can't change how you were feeling at the time. And I'm sure you had other life circumstances that were starting to occur. So all of those things matter. And
maybe
not. So it's a very tough spot to be in. And I would hope that your Paralympic appearances would have counted in your favor, but I'm not in the heads of those coaches.
The moral of this story is to put one event on a bunch of athletes, regardless of me, Josh, Cameron, anybody, is a lot of pressure. And the argument can be the Paralympics, the Para-Pan Am Games are a very quick pressure cooker. And so if you can't handle the pressure at the national championships, then we are looking around going, maybe we need to look in a different direction. And the other moral of the story is don't be so totally honest with your national sports organization in the sense of, this is my last kick at the can, because I agree with you, Josh. I think that was part of it, and they would never admit that. I've tried to get them to admit it now, years later, but they won't.
Well, you do have a unique relationship with the coach at the time, so.
Yes, I did. Yes, indeed.
And I think the third lesson here is to eat your Wheaties. Because eating your Wheaties might get you, to that spot where you could have been able to go to 2015.
Before I get myself in any more trouble with Bocce Canada, I'm going to move off of this topic. I love the people that work at Bocce Canada and still very involved there. But I think this is relevant for the moment of conversation. And they have moved towards one of these organizations who is using the whole year and not just one event. So maybe they've learned and understood, one event doesn't exactly write the end of the story. we have just under a half an hour, and I can't guarantee you where this is going to go because I'm going to be totally honest over the next little bit. I have been involved in media for 10 years. Cameron and I have been joking about that for a couple of weeks, conveniently. And
I'm old. You're old.
I, over the course of my career, have never been called out on anything, never had anything said to me
What?
in ill.
I've called you out plenty of times on the show. What are you talking about?
From my co-host, yes, but not from an external source,
Not from the public.
and that happened this week, and it was quite the situation. I was really surprised. There will be I'm not going to say the expletive, but I will tell you at the point where there is one, you will know. But yeah, here's the circumstance. So the Ottawa Senators and the Toronto Maple Leafs are playing in the Stanley Cup playoffs, in case you don't know this.
If you live under a rock, you don't know.
Exactly. And I was sent a video from a acquaintance of mine who is an Ottawa Senators fan.
And this was a private message?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
It was a private message, and the video essentially was a game of Pong without the beer in it. It was just the Pong with the red solo cups, and the idea was that the person kept missing the cup with his Pong ball, if you will, and then the caption would be the Leafs trying to win a Stanley Cup. And so it went from 1 cup to 2 cups to 3 cups to probably about 100 cups at the end. And at the end, the ball rolled off all 100 cups and it fell on the floor, and that was the end. I said to the person, it's 1 game at a time. I think they had played with Ottawa 1 game at this point. I said, yeah, it's 1 game at a time. And I just sort of chalked it up to be, 2 fans having a polite back and forth. Over the next couple of days, this individual kept coming back to me with various things. He was complaining about the discrepancy in penalties and giving me an example of, Stollards should have had more than 1 penalty. Here's an example of another one where he should have had 1, but he only got 1. And I responded to him and I said, yep, understand that. And I would say this, if I wasn't just a Leaf fan, you cannot control what referees do and don't do in a game. And, we just got to play how the whistle is being done. And I think Stollards deserved the penalty he got. And I think we would all agree with that around this panel. And he said to me, it's a good thing you got into media because you are expletive up like the rest of the Toronto media. And I said, okay, whoa, this is where this is going to end, because I don't believe I am effed like the rest of the Toronto media. I have never said on this podcast or otherwise that the Maple Leafs would win the Stanley Cup, or have I ever thought just because I support a Toronto team that they should be in the Stanley Cup final automatically. He has since apologized, but it was one of those moments where I was like, I basically was just called one of those Toronto-centric supporters, and it was quite an interesting feeling I had over social media for a little bit of time, and now understand how some of those high-profile broadcasters feel when they get called out on a regular basis. And it will make me think twice about calling out a broadcaster, because sometimes the realness hurts and you can feel a way about it. Thoughts from both of you. Let's start with Cameron. Your thoughts on the story I just outlined for you.
Social media is going to social media, man. If you put an opinion out there, somebody else is going to have an opinion back. And with us putting ourselves out there and putting opinions on social media, we have to try to learn to be thick-skinned about it, because if we're going to have an opinion, there's going to be those people that are just going to try to get under your skin and have an exact opposite opinion of you sometimes. Or if they know you like the Leafs, because you're a homer, you like the Leafs.
Yes, I do.
They're going to send you the Red Solo Cup things, and because I've seen that one before too. Like some of my buddies or whatever send me stuff, and I'll just be like, yeah, you're right on that one. They haven't won since 1967. Or, yeah, they're 1-12 in closing games out, to win a series. And like, it's all truth, what they're saying. So you might as well just agree with them. Or if you're in a feisty mood, then you can go back and forth and say, okay, yeah, well, your team are the Bruins, and they sucked this year. They didn't even make the playoffs, nor did the Rangers, nor did Chicago, or like, what's that? Or Philadelphia, or like, I don't know, a bunch of original six teams didn't even make the playoffs this year. So I have a buddy that's a Chicago Blackhawks fan, and every time, he'll stick the needle in me, I'll be like, your team's not even in the playoffs. Shut up. Don't want to hear about it. Or my other buddy's a Philadelphia Flyers fan. I'm like, yeah, how are they doing in the playoffs?
Poor guy. This year,
that was like, yeah, how's your team doing? But like, they're good because they take ownership of it and say, well, yeah, they suck. Okay, cool. They do. End of story. And then it usually stops from there. So I think that especially if you put something out there first, you've got to learn to defend it, or to, defend your point. And other people are just going to do it just to, piss you off. And that's what happens.
Absolutely. People are going to people. And sometimes it's fun to go back and forth and give a jab here and there. But there does have to be a limit to it, I think. And I think this person sounds like they realize that they went a bit too far, and that's good. We all have to sometimes understand that, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that, or maybe I took that too far. But at the same time, I think you can look at any fan of any series right now, and both sides have probably legitimate beef with the way the officiating has been done.
100%.
And I know we've talked to former referees on this program in the past. They have an incredibly hard job. But I mean, I look, for example, at the Montreal-Washington series right now. There have been some nasty, nasty hits. And if the referees do not pull their whistle out of their pocket and start doing something, someone is going to be out of the series and probably out of the playoffs. And I'm not talking the team. I'm talking a player is going to end up seriously injured.
Here. Yeah.
I have said on this program many times, and I stand by it, if it's a penalty in September, it's a penalty in April, May, and June. There should be no difference. And it drives me absolutely crazy when I see this sort of stuff, because it's not like when Cameron and I were younger and, watching the Oiler teams of the 80s or the Kings teams, or if you're old enough, maybe you remember the Broad Street Bullies of the 70s. But like, gone are the days where you see a bone crunching check and you think, oh yeah, that's a great play. Yeah. Now you see that play and you go, oh, is his head okay? Is he still attached to his body? Like, that's not good. And there were so many of them in that last Montreal game. In the Carolina and New Jersey game, you've seen players, good players. One of the Hughes boys is out of the series because he's injured on a play that probably should have been a penalty. Now, do I understand that perhaps in this scenario that we're talking about, that the penalties have gone more against Ottawa? Yes. That has to do with experience. And to your acquaintance, I hear you. You're right. The whistle has gone against you. But your team has to learn to be disciplined, and they have. The game 2, 3, 4, and I think we've up to 5 now we've had.
About to have game 5 tomorrow.
We're about to have game 5. So games 2, 3, and 4, they have learned.
100%.
And they have played better.
It was only the first game that they had a bunch of penalties, and otherwise the Leafs have more now. So
Exactly. So these things have a way of working themselves out. My issue with the officiating is what it's always been, and it's that a slash in September is still a slash in May and June. Come on, guys. Take your whistles out of your pockets, officiate the game like you have all year, and the players will adjust to it. We shouldn't see instances where Josh Anderson and Tom Wilson need to drop the gloves and sort something out because Wilson tried to take somebody's head off. Like, that shouldn't happen if the referees are doing their job.
And that wasn't a penalty, but apparently it wasn't right up against his head or whatever, and that's why it wasn't a penalty.
It wasn't a penalty. Yeah, sure.
That's what they're saying. But like, I agree. Like, I think the NHL is the only league with the officiating where it changes from the regular season to the playoffs. In the NBA and the Major League Baseball and the Major League Soccer, I think the officiating is pretty much very close to the same as the regular season as it is the playoffs. So why it's so different in the NHL, I have no idea. And like that series that Montreal and Washington, they were all in the frickin' box or in the whatever you call it, like bench, where they were sitting, where all the skaters sit. Like they were all in there and they were like starting to fight and so on and so on. And I'm just like, take a chill pill, man.
It looked like the Ottawa Senators and Toronto Maple Leafs in 2004 or 6, whatever in the heck it was, 4, when they were in the bench. And they were talking about it on the panel going, you wouldn't be able to do this anymore. Like this is not okay. No. Like they were talking about Pat Quinn being this like big man back there. And that was in 2004. You can't do that now. Like the bench has got to be.
But they just did.
I know.
A couple of days ago.
I know.
Exactly.
I know.
And they were actually in the bench and they were fighting like in the bench, on the bench.
I know.
Flipping nuts, man.
Yep. Spencer Carberry had a good look at that one.
Yeah, sure he did. A couple of things I just want to put out here. Unequivocally, I do not believe from a broadcaster point of view that the Toronto Maple Leafs are going to win the Stanley Cup. The only Canadian team that I have some hope for, although they've looked kind of awful in the last couple of games, is the Winnipeg Jets. I don't see any other Canadian team that can pull this out.
Have you watched the Winnipeg Jets the couple of past games?
I know, but
are you on
that's
some sort of good drugs right now?
That's what I'm saying, though. I know the first 2 games they look like world beaters, and the last 2 not so much. But I'm giving them a pass right now.
My God.
The only team that I see getting it done is the Winnipeg Jets. The Edmonton Oilers gave me some hope because they pulled themselves out of a 2-0 hole, which I did not think was going to happen. I thought they were going to go home in 5. The Toronto Maple Leafs now, Cameron, just to make everybody feel so warm and fuzzy inside, are now 2-13 in clinching games. So that stat is not getting better with the loss in game 4, but I do think it gets done before too long.
They were up 3-0. Like, don't even
3-1
start
now. Before we move on to the last chunk of the program, which I want to give a few minutes to, before we move off the NHL playoffs, any other series that you guys have enjoyed watching that you haven't mentioned, or anything you haven't mentioned that you want to mention on the stuff that you have said? So let's start with Cameron. Go.
Yeah, I kind of like that Colorado-Dallas series. I thought that was going to be a bit of a humdinger, and it's looking like it is going to be a bit of a humdinger. It's going to be a bit closer of the series, and to me, that's like the Stanley Cup or East or the Western Conference final anyway. It just happens to be happening in round one. So yeah, I kind of like that series, and I'm interested to see how that one's going to play out.
Yeah, I'm curious to see if Edmonton can come back. I don't know that they can, to be quite honest, but they have won the last 2 games in Edmonton, so that says something. Toronto, I think, is doing fine. I think they will finish off Ottawa, whether it's in 5 games or 6 games or even 7 games. I don't know, but they are a better team. They have to develop that killer instinct, which we've said for years. New Jersey, Carolina, kind of going the way I expected it to. I thought Carolina would dispatch New Jersey fairly easily. We'll see what happens there. And Florida and Tampa keep killing each other, boys.
Yeah, it looked like Florida was going to run away with that series, and then Tampa Bay's making a series out of it now. So it's kind of nice to see.
Yeah, they remembered that they were former Stanley Cup champions. So, it takes a while. It comes back.
Yeah, apparently.
Montreal also made themselves a series when they won the first game at home. I really was thinking they were going to pull off the same kind of thing that Edmonton has done. I thought they were going to tie it up in that series there too. But I think, again, skill level and experience on Montreal is just not there yet. And I think for them, they're looking at it and going, we made the playoffs, and that's good. And I think this is good for the future of the Montreal Canadiens. And I'm getting a canker in my mouth because I'm giving Montreal some love here, but it's happening. Yeah.
And you know what, Brock? At the end of the day, we talk sports. We make predictions. We're allowed to make predictions because you're all the time, okay, who's going to win the Eastern Conference, the Western Conference, who's going to win the Stanley Cup final? So if you damn well want to say that your prediction is the Leafs are going to win the Cup, then you can say that. Doesn't necessarily make you a homer. You like the Leafs. If I'm saying it, I'm definitely a homer, and I admit that. But you're allowed to flip and well say it because that's what we do. We talk sports and we make predictions.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. And I think from the realist point of me says, as much as I want to see the Leafs go far, and I would be satisfied with a conference final this year. And I know that we're steps away from that and a few
screw that away. Aim high. Let's go to the Cup final.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't see it. But what I do see is I have to tell the audience that we are coming to an end of another chapter in our neutral zone time. OnPara, 16 months ago, led by Doug Hannum, has graciously taken us and said, we'll pick you guys up and bring you along for 16 months. And they have done a wonderful job. They've let us, kind of do the things we want to do, and they've loved our podcast. With that said, today is our last day with OnPara as our sponsor. I would like to take an opportunity before I talk anything related to the future of the Neutral Zone. I'd like to take an opportunity to thank them for all that they have done for us. We've been taken care of very well, and we've appreciated their partnership and what they've done. So thank you to OnPara for what they've done, and we really appreciate them. And our door will always be open to guests and things that they want, because that's what we do. We do parasports here, and so we will happily keep the door open there. Thoughts from both of you before we talk about future plans with the Neutral Zone? I'm not going to pick somebody, so somebody just say their thoughts.
Thank you to OnPara for your support over the last 16 months. It's been greatly appreciated, and we've enjoyed doing that and highlighting Ontario para events. And yeah, thank you for the opportunity that you've given us. And yeah, we're looking forward to the future.
Absolutely. It has been an absolute pleasure to represent OnPara while doing this podcast. Doug and Tammy and the team are a great group of people. They do a wonderful job, and we absolutely have a debt of gratitude to them. It's going to be interesting to see how we move forward from here, but we will. And I'm looking forward to the future.
So let's talk a little bit about the future. And here's what we know as of today, as we're recording this. We know that we're committed to doing the podcast, and we're committed until the end of the summer. Regardless of whether we have a sponsor or we don't. We will be giving you weekly shows every single week, and we will enjoy it. We will be having the same standard of guests that we've had for the last 10 years, and that's just the way it's going to be. But you just won't hear the tags with OnPara moving forward because they are no longer a sponsor. But that doesn't mean that we are not going to do this. And I want to close this out by I was going to do this next week, but it doesn't really make a lot of sense. So I'm going to close this out with both of you. Just kind of give me your thoughts on why for us it is important to continue to do the podcast as we've done it, sponsor or not. Let's start with Josh on this one.
The reason a podcast of this nature is absolutely critical is because exposure to parasports needs to happen in order for it to grow. It is wonderful that we see organizations like TSN step up and cover things like the Para Hockey Championships and things of that nature. It's great that the Canadian broadcast landscape covers the Paralympics, but there's a whole lot of other events that happen in between those. And those people, the grassroots athletes, the provincial athletes, the national athletes, do not get the same level of coverage that an Olympian, a professional sports athlete gets. And so if we, with our small little podcast here, can shine a light on those people and let the world know that these sports exist, number one, we're bringing exposure to athletes that deserve it. And number two, we're letting people know that these sports exist. Because if you don't know that a sport exists, how can you participate? There might be somebody with cerebral palsy out there listening to us who doesn't know about bocce. They've never been exposed to it. We have a 2-time Paralympian in bocce. We might have somebody who loves hockey but doesn't think that they can play hockey because they're in a wheelchair. Cam, Claire, and I have all played hockey. There are athletes out there who might want to, they might see people at the Olympics and the Paralympics and go, I'd like to do that, but they don't know how. We can bring that information and exposure to them. That's why this is important.
Yeah, like I couldn't have said it any better myself of what Josh said. It's important so people listening to the podcast that they know what's going on in the parasport world, because you never know when somebody listens to our podcast and says, hey, I didn't even know that this was available. So therefore, I want to be able to try this and do this. And because we put it out there, then we may have just helped somebody find something that, you know, is near and dear to their hearts and that they want to do. It becomes a passion for them. So, you know, that's one of the reasons why I do this, is to be able to represent parasports and talk about a lot of different parasports so people know that there's things to do out there. Because I think a lot of people don't necessarily know that. So that's one of the reasons why I love doing this podcast. And then I love also, you know, the pro sports side of it as well, just talking pro sports and then kind of bickering with you guys, you know, back and forth. And that's you know, for me, that's a fun part of it too, is just to have those sports debates, to go back and forth and see other people's points of views. Because if you're agreeing on everything, you're not gonna grow yourself, because you only know your point of view, and you need to hear other people's points of view. And that just doesn't go for sports, but that's just everything in life. It's good to listen to other people and other points of view. So that's another reason why I love doing this podcast, is to get into those sports discussions. And yeah, call me a SD or whatever you want, but sometimes I'll ask certain questions that I know it's going to start a certain conversation, or it's going to get a certain reaction. But that's where, the love of it comes from as well. And hopefully the listeners also enjoy that part of it too.
I had to use my brain on that one. When you said SD, I'm thinking, I got it now. You don't need to give me any.
Am I allowed to say it on the podcast? I'll say it if I'm allowed to say the word.
Not this week. No, okay. I got it. I understand. Okay. But I did take a second to be like, an SD. Where are we going with but then the more you described
card to put in your computer.
The more you described it, the more I got it. My thoughts on this are simple. I told you from the beginning, 16 months ago, when we got picked up again, moving from AMI to OnPara, I said that I wanted to end it on our terms. When we ended the first regime, I was a bit surprised. I think we all were. And it was just like, okay, well, now we're done. And that wasn't going to happen this time. I want to end this on our terms, and the fact that I have my entire panel committed for another 4 months at least to do this, that speaks volume, because I know that what we're doing is something. And I also know this has been a passion project of mine for a long time. I was given this podcast and took it and ran with it and said, let's do something with it. And we've done that, and we're going to continue to do that. Thirdly, the reason I cannot just let this go is because we have seen growth in the audience that we have brought along with us, and we can't give up on you folks, and we don't want to do that. So we thank all of you for what you've done for the podcast and brought us forward, even when we've had to switch sponsors, had no sponsor, whatever the case has been, you've always been there. So we appreciate that. Finally, I also just want to shout out our technical producer, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a genuine conversation that I had with Mark when this came down. Mark said to me, so what's the plan with the podcast? And I said, well, I don't know. And he said, well, I'm willing to put together a package to help you guys get sponsored. And if you guys are committed, I'm committed to this. And I said, well, no, Mark, we'll find a way to fund you, because listening to our voices for an hour plus can be tedious at times. And Mark said, no. You're not paying me, you're not doing this, we're all doing this the way we want to, and unsponsored for hopefully a short time, but it's never been about the money for any of us. So thank you, Mark, for all that you've done as well, and sticking on board with us. We greatly appreciate it. We will be back next week. We're going to be talking wheelchair rugby. We're going to have the Canadian wheelchair rugby coach join us next week. So stay tuned for that. And you never know what happens when you enter the neutral zone. Be safe, be well. And for the last time, let's hear from the Ontario Para Network. Thank you to everybody over there.
The Neutral Zone is brought to you by the Ontario Para Network. Connect with them at OnPara Network. Follow them online at onpara.ca. Now that's a winning combination.